Baptist Quincy, kids. So remember last week we learned all about Isaiah. And we learned that God told Isaiah his rescue plan. And remember, Isaiah was writing about the future, about the rescuer king that would come and do amazing things. And then he would suffer and die. But he wouldn't stay dead. Remember, God will make him alive again. And the whole world will be perfect once again. And so we memorized a verse, and it came from Isaiah chapter 53, verse 6. And it said, "The Lord has laid on him the sin of us all." Remember, talking about who the Lord laid the sin on was talking about Jesus. It was on him. All of our sin was laid on Jesus. So today's story comes from the book of Daniel, and we learned that Daniel had a really good habit. Do you know what a habit is? Remember, a habit is something that you do a lot. It's something that you repeat over and over again. So Daniel's good habit was that he prayed, and we're going to learn how David's good habit of praying got him into some trouble. So today's story comes from Daniel and the Lion's Den from Daniel chapter 6. It's called Daniel and the Scary Sleepover. And if you have your Jesus Storybook Bible, it's on page 152 and you can follow along. It says, "Things were not looking good for God's people. They had been captured and taken far from home, and now they were slaves of the king of Babylon. But God had not left his people. He was with them, and he was looking after them. Daniel loved God and obeyed him. Now God made Daniel able to understand lots of difficult things, so it wasn't long before the king of Babylon noticed him. King Darius liked how clever Daniel was, so he made Daniel his most important helper of all, and put him in charge of lots of other helpers. But the other helpers didn't like this. They wanted the king to like them best. They wanted to get rid of Daniel. So they spied on Daniel. They tried to find things wrong with him. Things that they could tell the king. Things they could. But there weren't any. None. They couldn't find anything at all. Except there was just one thing. Every day, 3 times a day, without fail, no matter what, Daniel went to his room, closed the door, and prayed. They smiled to themselves. Let's get the king to make a law. No one is allowed to pray to anyone except to the king. Daniel won't obey this law, and he will be punished. They were pleased with themselves for being so clever and hurried off to tell the king. The king liked their idea. He didn't know that they were tricking him, so he made it into a law. Everyone must pray only to me. If you don't, the lions will have you for their dinner. Daniel heard this. He knew it was wrong to pray to anyone except God. He had to do what God said, whatever it cost him, even if it meant he would die. So Daniel went to his room, closed the door, and prayed. That's just what the bad men knew Daniel would do. They skipped straight off to tell the king, "Oh, your most glittering highness, your law says, does it not, that everyone must pray to you, sire?" "Yes," said the king. "Oh, magisterial brightness, then correct us if we're wrong, but it would seem that Daniel is praying to God, not to you." The king was sad. He had been tricked. He didn't want to hurt Daniel, but he couldn't change his law, and so he let the soldiers throw Daniel to the lions. "May your God, who you love so much, rescue you," the king said. The king went back to his palace, but he didn't sleep that night. Not a wink. He tossed and turned until finally, at the first glimmer of dawn, he leaped out of bed and ran straight to the den. "Daniel," he cried, "has your God rescued you?" "Yes," Daniel shouted. "God sent an angel to close the lions' mouths." And there, resting his head on Daniel's lap, was the biggest lion purring like a little kitten. The king brought Daniel out of the den. "Look," he said. Daniel doesn't even have a scratch. The king made a new law. Daniel's God is the true God, the God who rescues. Pray to him instead. God would keep on rescuing his people, and the time was coming when God would send another brave hero like Daniel who would love God and do what God said, whatever it cost him, even if it meant he would die. And together they would pull off the greatest rescue the world has ever known. So if you listen to Pastor Jeff's sermon last Sunday, he talked about Daniel too. And remember, he said Daniel and his friends were probably only 15 or 16 years old. And so they were young, but they knew who to pray to. They had good habits that were established even when they were young to pray to their God, to honor their God and obey their God. And that's just so important, guys. So we learned that Daniel chose to pray to God and obey God even when it put him in danger. So did you know that still happens today, that some people who are obeying God and praying to God are in danger right now? You may not know someone personally that's in danger because of this, but there are places around the world where you can be sent to jail for obeying God. Or you may lose your friends or your job if they find out that you're obeying God. And so the question is, will you obey God no matter what it costs you? Think about Daniel. He was not much older than you. He was about 15 or 16 years old. And he knew to stand firm and obey God no matter what it cost him, even going to the lion's den. I'm sure that was a really scary time for him. So we learned that God rescued Daniel from the mouths of the lions. What a cool story. We discovered that it is God who saves in the stories we've been learning the past few weeks. And next week we're going to learn about Jonah. And so we're going to learn a verse today that actually comes from the book of Jonah, chapter 2, verse 5. And it says, "Salvation comes from the Lord." And the word salvation just means to save or be rescued. So to be saved or rescued only comes from the Lord. And we've been learning about that over the last few weeks. And think about in our story today, it talks about someone who would come and obey God no matter what it cost him. Remember, that was referring to Jesus at the end of our story today. That no matter what it costs, even his life, he would obey God and what he said. And Jesus did that for us. So I have some questions for you. So you're going to do a thumbs up if you think it's true from the story, and a thumbs down if you think it's not true from the story. So the first statement from our story today says Daniel had a habit. He prayed every day. True or not true? It was true. Remember, he did good habit, prayed every day. Because Daniel was very clever, King Darius sent him to school. True or not true? Not true. The other helpers liked Daniel and were happy he was in charge. Did the other people like him and like him being in charge? Not true. They did not like Daniel. The other helpers spied on Daniel and tried to find things that were wrong with him. True. Remember, they tried to find something that was wrong with him, and they had a very difficult time finding things that were wrong with Daniel until they realized that he prayed to God. Daniel had done nothing wrong. True or not true? That is true. He made all the right choices. The helpers knew that Daniel prayed to God every day. That was true. They found that out and they used it against him. The helpers set a trap for Daniel. They got the king to chase Daniel with a huge net. True or not true? That was not true. They did not chase him with a net. The helpers got the king to make a new law that no one is allowed to pray to anyone except the king. Remember, that is true. That is the new law that they made to try to trick Daniel. If you broke the law, you'd be sent into timeout. True or not true? That is not true. They did not go to timeout. Daniel knew it was wrong to pray to anyone except God. He had to obey God, whatever it cost him. That is true. Remember, no matter what it costs, he was going to obey God, and we should do the same thing. The helpers told the king that Daniel was praying to God, and the king changed the law to save Daniel. That is not true. The king never changed the law before finding out about Daniel and that he prayed to God. Daniel was thrown to the lions, but the lions weren't hungry, so Daniel was rescued. True or not true? Not true. The lions were hungry, but remember, God is the one that saved him. It wasn't because the lions weren't hungry and didn't want to eat him in the lion's den. And our last question. Daniel was thrown to the lions, but God sent an angel to close the lion's mouth, so Daniel was rescued. True or not true? Remember, that is true. God sent an angel to rescue him from the mouths of the lions. So this is going to be a handout that is saved on our firstbaptistquincy.com website. So when you pull up the website, there's going to be a link that says click here to go to children's activities, and when you click there, you can see all of our activities that go with today's lesson. There are crafts, there are games, there is a snack you can create that has to do with the lions in Daniel's story today, and there's some songs that also go with Daniel and the lion's den. So I really hope you can check those out. This is going to be one of the things, it's our handout that you would get if we were meeting on a Wednesday night. So it says Daniel and the Scary Sleepover, and in the bubble, if you're able to print this, or you can draw your own picture of Daniel and the lion's den, I want you to draw a picture or write some words that you think Daniel is thinking or feeling. And remember, at the bottom of our handout, if you were to get it on a Wednesday night, it has our verse that we just learned. That comes from Jonah chapter 2, verse 9. Remember, it says, salvation comes from the Lord. So if you're able to, you can print this out or draw your own picture of Daniel in the lion's den and what he may be thinking during that time. So let's go ahead and pray together. Don't forget to check out firstbaptistquincy.com for all the activities that you can do at home that have to do with our lesson today. Let's pray. Dear God, thank you so much for the story of Daniel and his good habit of praying to you, God. I pray that's true for all of us, that we have a good habit of praying to you and obeying you no matter what it costs, Lord. And I just pray that you will show these children, Lord, that the salvation comes only from you, that you are a rescuer and you sent your son to die for us. And he was our great rescue plan that you had for us. And Lord, I just pray that no matter what hard situation we may come in as we grow up and change, Lord, that no matter what, we'll choose to obey you no matter what it costs. In your name, amen. Have a great week. I'll see you next time. Bye.